Okay, today we're going to be using this beautiful Rollei SL-66, doing some macro photography and some normal photography, some of these beautiful flowers. And we have the yellow blossoms and we have some beautiful purple ones. But I wanted to show you why this is so special for this type of photography. And it's unlike most cameras. It's got features that no other camera has. And there are about four really that pertain to what we're doing today. One, these are extremely sharp lenses, but this also has a unique feature that you can take this lens off. This is the 80 millimeter. You can take it off and turn it around, retrofit it to really get in super close. If you just want to do insects and real fine, close detail, that would work for you. But 99% of the time don't have to do that, because the second great feature about this camera is got a built-in bellows. Now, this is not just a regular bellows. It does a couple things. One, I want you to notice there's a scale on the side here. The top part there's a for 80 millimeter and a 150 and a 120, and then the bottom is 80 again. These are magnification factors, and it will tell you exactly what you're going to have to compensate for in your exposure, because as you know, you have reciprocity failure, but also in this case, when you have long bellows extension, you're going to lose light. And so this will tell you on the scale how much to increase your exposure. And we're going to be working in the realm about only half a stop more increase in the exposure, because we lose a little light there. And so not a big issue. You don't have to calculate it and measure and do all that. This tells you automatically what to do. And the other cool feature about this, and no other cameras like this, there's a release here, and you can tilt and drop this bed like a view camera, up or down. And so that allows you to get extreme good depth of field. A lot of people don't think about that when they're doing macro photography, but when you have a line of flowers, these cactus blossoms that are almost on a flat plane, you can tilt this down and you can get maximum depth of field while the lens is still wide open. That comes in really handy if you're shooting in a little breeze where things are moving around and you don't want to have to shoot down to 22 and then have a long exposure. So this way you don't have to stop all the way down, and you can get really good exposure, depth of field, I should say. So anyhow, that's another one of the features is this beautiful drop bellows here. And one of the other features I like about this is it's very versatile as far as the angle of view, because we have this, and this is like eye level, just point and shoot like regular camera pretty much. But if you want to shoot straight down and you're kind of, you can't get over to see, you can take this off and use the regular waist level finder, just like the regular twin lens Rolleiflex or the Yashica map. And so it gives you a lot more versatility. If you're shooting way down low, which you're frequently going to be doing when you're doing these flowers, and you'll be able to look down through that other viewfinder, and it'll see very clearly. Another nice thing I like to do, these flower blossoms, cactus in particular, oftentimes have a real glossy sheen to them. And so what I like to do is use a polarizing filter, knock that down sometimes. Not always. Everything I'm telling you today is not carved in stone. I experiment like that when we're using the diffuser. I don't use it all the time, and I don't want you to think that you need to do that all the time. You can just, you don't want to make the light too flat, but you might want to use that just to darken the background just a little bit, just diffuse the background. But so experiment and have fun with it. And I always encourage my students to experiment. Like this camera, I can get it right in and among the cactus blossoms. I got to be very careful with those spines, of course, but upward angles was a little different. You don't oftentimes see that when you're photographing flowers. But shooting straight down, that's kind of a common thing, but a little angle. So experiment with compositions. Get in close, get back up, and use the same composition, but just change your position slightly, and play with the background, and use the scrim, but also use the black background to separate things. Another special feature about this, it's a single lens reflex, so it has a big mirror that goes up and down, and it has a focal plane shutter in the back. But to help reduce the vibration if you're going to make a long exposure, and I almost do this on all my shots, I'm using a tripod 90% of the time, this little slider here actually locks the mirror up out of the way. When that settles down, and then you can press this and it'll take the picture. And so you don't have any of that vibration. Just slide that down and you'll probably hear it going off. Can you hear that? So now the mirror's up out of the way. So now I could take the picture, just push this in. And there you go. Those are some of the features that make this special for what we're doing today. And again, we're not going to go into great detail about the camera because I have another video about that. So with that said, let's go take some pictures. We're going to be photographing these beautiful flowers behind us, and the little planter box, and the flowers are just starting to open now, so we'll have to wait a little bit, maybe just about a half hour, and they'll be out pretty much. But I'll be scouting around. I've looked a little bit, have a couple nice compositions set up, and a lot of folks have asked me. I used to teach these workshops down in Arizona on wildflower photography, but today we're going to do cactus, and that's kind of a specialty because there's special considerations you have to take when doing cactus. One of them is safety, of course, but there are three things that really help what I do, that's always in my kit in the back of my truck. And some of the problems we face when doing particularly cactus, by the way, excuse the audio, I'm sorry, we're next to a highway, and it's a little crazy, but we'll get the message across to you, I'm sure. Okay, the cactus blossoms are real shiny, they're real glossy, so that's pretty high contrast. And when we have harsh lighting overhead, that can really create problems. The contrast is something we have to learn to handle, and one of the things we can do that with is one of these scrims. It's a special hoop sort of thing, and it's got like a real thin material, cloth. I use a nylon one. And so I shade the flowers, that area that I want to knock the contrast down with. Very important if you're shooting slide film in particular, because the latitude of slide film is very minimal. But today we're shooting Portrait 400, and we're going to be working with some depth of field issues too, because we're using a big Rollei SL-66 camera. One of the things we want to do, of course, is control the contrast. We can do that by using this big scrim. And it doesn't just shade. There's so much difference between just putting a shade over it, a piece of cardboard or your shadow or something. That can work, but it doesn't do one magical thing. And with these scrims, almost transparent, and what it does, the sun shines down, it hits that scrim, and it bounces the light, diffuses it very nicely, but it also directs some of that light in a downward straight direction, which will let you penetrate into the center of the blossom. And oftentimes that's a real issue because that's dark and then the outside is very, very bright. So better to use a scrim like this rather than just a shade it with a cardboard or something like that. So now we have the contrast issue pretty much solved. And the other thing we have to do is consider the subject itself and the scene, the composition. We need to make sure that we do a little housekeeping. A lot of people, they say, well, that's cheating or that's not natural, and I say baloney to that. You want to have the area pretty cleaned up. I mean, you don't want it to be crazy clean, but with these cactus, oftentimes we have little shrubs and bushes, weeds, and trash and stuff. So one of the things that will help you when you don't want to reach your hands down in there between those cactus spines and all. So one of the things that I use all the time, it's in my kit, is little prongs. You can get down between the cactus, pull up the trash, do a little housekeeping. And the other thing that I like to do to sometimes control the environment a little bit, not cheating a whole lot, but we're going to see here in a minute, I'm going to show you a cactus, a couple setups that look really pretty good, but there's one group of flowers and there's another cactus that's leaning over, so it won't allow this one blossom to open up fully. So I always keep a few little pieces of cardboard, various sizes, and I'll be able to wedge that in and kind of push things around, being careful not to break anything, but I won't get my fingers poked with those spines, but this will help us move things away and kind of control things a little bit. And when we have a good composition, even if we've done our housekeeping, we've knocked down the contrast, the background might be really too busy. One of the things I always talk about in my workshops, I always tell my students, before you take the picture, before you actually execute and push that button, scan the perimeter all around the edges to make sure nothing weird is sticking inside the tops or the bottom, or, excuse this out here. And you want to look behind your subject. Scan the perimeter, and then look behind your subject to see if there's anything weird going on there. And I was doing a workshop not too long ago down in Arizona, and my students did excellently. The scrim's up, the lighting was great, the background was okay, but they weren't looking far enough behind in the background. We cleaned up, and they lit up everything, but in the top right-hand corner, most of the pictures was this sitting on the ground about 20 feet away, 15 feet away, was this bright red Coca-Cola can. So distracting, it's crazy. And they didn't even see that when they were arranging things. So one thing, you always got to check that. Now the other thing, you might have an interesting composition, but the background might be a little different than what you want, and you might want to isolate just the blossom, and we're going to do that. I like the environmental shots. Being a cinematographer and a photojournalist, the three pictures you always want to try to get when you're doing a setup. One is a wide shot, kind of shows the environment, the setting, where you are, and then a medium shot, and that kind of shows a little tighter, of course, in this case a group of cactus, and then a close-up. So a wide, medium, and close-up. Now the close-up will be a detail of the blossoms. Okay, a lot of folks were asking what kind of scrim I use. You can actually make your own, just get a real thin, like nylon material, and just tape it or attach it to a regular window screen frame, and that works really quite well. But this is a really wonderful little accessory here. It's a series of different types of reflectors. It can be a scrim, it can be a gold reflector, it can be just solid black, you just want to shade something, and also silver. But today we're going to use the scrim part that allows the light to pass through and doesn't completely block it, but fairly compact. Now when I open this up, what you do, you want to hold on to one end, and it's going to kind of explode a little bit, so be careful, okay? Now there's the good reflector. I'm going to shine this in the lens here. That's a big bright. Now on this side, it's just solid black. So if we wanted to just shade something very, very dark, you know, we could just put this shade down here. But the beautiful thing about this particular type of setup, there's actually this outer cover that has the black and the silver. But on the inside, you can take this off, and on the inside, you've got your scrim. But you could reverse this whole thing, and you could have just a solid white reflector if you wanted to have just the white, or you could turn it and have the gold. So you get like 5 different setups in one here. But today we're going to be using this little scrim. And you can see it's a really thin material, and it really doesn't completely block the light, but it bounces it out, and it cuts the contrast a lot. So particularly like we said in slide film, it's very limited. Doesn't work very well with real contrasty scenes. But when you filter the sunlight through this on your subject, your flowers, these cactus blossoms, you'll see it's a world of difference. Kind of expands that latitude actually. So that's what we'll be using to do our shading. And so now let's take a little closer look at some of the flowers. Okay, now we have a little closer view of these beautiful blossoms starting to open up nicely, but as I mentioned earlier, we want to do a lot of housekeeping. It's pretty crazy. We got all these weeds blown in here, some trash, and all these spider webs. And again, don't use your fingers for this stuff because you might not see it, but you're going to get zapped. So I use this and just get rid of these. So get those out of the way, and get that out of the way, and I don't see anything else done in there. That's too bad. But I was telling you earlier about this. I like this little composition here, but look how this is leaning against that and not really letting it show through. So what I'm going to do is try and wedge a little piece of my cardboard. So I'll fold it and I'll see if I can just push that back a little bit, and we'll take a minute or so, and then that's going to come back to good shape. And now with the scrim in place, you get an opportunity to see just how it flattens out the light, and of course it knocks down the light a little bit, but it also cuts the contrast, so that's pretty nice. Okay, we have these beautiful yellow flowers here, and my basic exposure is going to be 500th of a second at f16, and so I don't have to lock up the shutter or anything because that's pretty fast. And so using a Sunny 16 rule, you just use your shutter speed at the speed of the film, and then you do f16. So I'm going, matter of fact, I'm going to go step down to between 16 and 22 and shoot at 500 because this is extremely bright and glossy. So I want to get the detail, and if anything that's too dark, I can correct that in post. So let's take our first picture here. Looking good. Okay. Now this one I did without the scrim. I'm going to do another one with the scrim so you can compare the difference and see which one you like best. So you got that background, it's curved, so you see a nice black background for the flower, but yet the flower is in the sunlight. So okay, I see some nice ones over here. Yeah, I'm just focusing on the buds in the foreground this time, and then we'll just tilt it up and get a little color in the background. That should be very nice. Yeah, I'm striving for a variety. Throw the background in focus or the background out of focus. It's kind of fun to experiment a little bit.